Hello, everyone. It is my honor today to talk to Amy Hunter. I came across Amy almost 10 years ago, and I have seen the leader she has been throughout those last 10 years and where she is at this point in her life. So instead of me talking about Amy, who I think is a great diversity leader, I would like Amy to talk a little bit about herself and where she started from.
Of course, I'm always honored to be with you. You're one of my favorite people in the whole world. I am where I am because of you. So I am also honored to be with you. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. I started my career at in nonprofit and then moved to corporate pretty quickly. In diversity in particular has been my focus. I think I was an analyst for about a year, not my most fun year. But my life's work has really been towards equity, diversity, and inclusion. Currently, I work at Caleris, but I've worked for other companies, financial institutions, an ag company, hospital, nonprofit twice. And the work remains the same, kind of where I enter that work might be a little different. And so I want to honor that the importance around doing this work every day is what brings me joy. And there are a couple of mile markers in my own life that I think have been successful that are open, right, to share with other people. And I think out of my whole journey from nonprofit to corporate, I think I was in corporate for 13 years, something like that. And then I went back to nonprofit, which is where I met you when I worked at the YWCA, really rewarding work and not so different from corporate. I had a closer touch to people, which I enjoyed a lot. And then realized going back into corporate space might give me a little more latitude for policies and processes and to be a gateway for other people into that space. So I returned to corporate. It's been a great journey. The whole ride has been amazing. I will say that one of the things I hope people pay attention to is to go, like to jump, not be afraid. I think that's probably I'm scared every time I leave my job for another job, but I'm always glad I did it.
So that is an important lesson that don't be afraid, be courageous, and whatever comes your way in terms of transformation or transition, take it. One of the initial conversations I had with you way back when we were preparing, and the one concept which you used was kinship and intersectional kinship. In my mind, that has been a guiding concept for you because it was also one of the pivotal events in your life when you talk about your son and how the younger generation is stereotyped from that experience. So, can you talk a little bit about the kinship and intersectional kinship and how the pivotal moment have evolved you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started my PhD program when my kids were still small. I'm a single mom of four. I know that all sounded probably crazy to do, but I'll graduate in May. So there's a light at the end of this tunnel. It's taken a long time, but that's okay. I think I said 10 years will happen whether I get my PhD or not. So I might as well start my journey. And along this process, like a lot of things have happened, right? I got a divorce during that time. My mother died during that time, who was my last parent. And fictive kinship, which is one of the words I fell in love with, is explains kind of how my life is arranged right now. So I only have a brother and a sister, both live out of town. And so I'm kind of in a constant mode of collecting people to be my family.
Mhm.
And collectivist culture does this naturally. So lucky, it doesn't look that strange when I'm inviting people over or making my kids call them aunt or uncle, because part of my cultural norm is to build family with people that are not biologically related. I think what that framing though does, especially in the work of diversity, is that if everyone is my cousin, then it makes me respond to you in a really loving way. It also makes me advocate for you as if you're my family. And so I think everything that I think about in diversity is, if that were my sister, if that were my brother, how could I make this so? What conversations would I have? And in my family, we're very honest with each other. So I'd have a loving and honest conversation. And I think that's what people really need. I mean, I think that's what I got from you, quite honestly, during that time. My talk would have been very different if you hadn't been loving and honest at the same time. And I was terrified, and you reassured me it would be okay. And so
Mhm.
when I think about, gosh, if all of us did that all the time with each other, how much better would we be? How much more a loving society would we be? How much further along in our careers or lives would we be? And I have absolutely nothing to lose. I think part of fictive kinship also sets up this frame that if you're in my family, you're always in my family. So I'm not going to let you go, and I'm not going to let you go and lose you. So there's a little less fear in me moving towards people in a loving way when I know that we're here to stay connected. And even though we don't even know how that's going to work out, like we still stayed connected all this time. And so,
Yeah. So this reminds, actually, this brings back good old memories. Thank you for talking about fictive kinship. But fictive kinship is, when I was framing it as an intersectional kinship, also is across the geographies, across the borders, across the backgrounds and ethnicities. But this reminds me of my own large family when once we took 20 years ago a picture at a cousin's wedding, and we all collected together. There were 37 first cousins and second cousins, uh, blood relatives. So some cultures which tend to and used to have large families, there is some vibration still in there, but we have become a society of loners. It is more important for us to find this kinship. Most of our waking time we spend in our workplaces or work environments prior to pandemic, and then we were with ourselves. So how does this fictive kinship translates or not translates into the workplaces to create a sense of belonging?
some of what we see kind of naturally happen anyway. I think the other part has to be intentional. And so I think, to your point, I think, depends on how you were raised and what feels normal to you. So for me, gathering people feels very normal. I watch my grandmother do it. I watch my parents do it. But I understand individualistic culture is very independent. And so noticing, especially during the pandemic, how people thrived in a space where they saw no one, or didn't thrive in a space where they saw no one. And I think even though we thought we could be fine by ourselves, 2 years of being alone makes you really appreciate the time that you do have when you see other people that you like and love. And so I agree, even in my culture, we are moving more towards individualistic culture. I think if there was a gift the pandemic did give us, it was an appreciation for gathering and for being with one another, and for it being okay to need one another. In the ways in which I think we trick ourselves, especially as adults, and say, like, I don't need anybody ever. I can do it all by myself. The pandemic gave us this wonderful lens to say, like, it's okay to need each other, and it's okay to be with each other. It's okay to want to be with each other without any apology. This intersection of fictive kinship is something we can create across the globe. And now we can do it with technology.
So yes, we can. It depends if we are looking for that direction or that
Yes.
avenue or not, because we have also become a society. We have been a society of social conformity. This is how we were raised. This is what we were told. This is the belief. Whatever the social norms we are supposed to follow, whom we are supposed to interact and socialize with. So it is in contrast with fictive kinship. And
Yes.
it is so ingrained in our brains. How can we navigate this inter conflicting concepts or ideologies?
I feel like in some ways it's a full circle. In my TED talk that I did, Lucky Zip Codes, I talked about love. And I talked about love because as a woman who is divorced, I remember thinking I would never love again. I would actually never date again, probably ever. And that is not the case. I have dated and fallen in love again.
Mhm.
And I think fictive kinship and this relationship with each other has to be that moment. I think in the ways that our hearts have been broken before in relationships keeps us from forging those new relationships. I can hardly think of anything better than love. And it is worth the risk. It's worth going back out and having strong relationships with people. And so if you call me and say, hey, I'm a new person in diversity and I need a strategy, I will literally send you my strategy. Here, take my strategy. Here, all the trainings that I've ever done. Here's everything that I have. A, because I don't believe it's mine. I think it belongs to the universe. And B, I would love for the world to be a better place. And if I have something that would make the world a better place, I would love to share it. And I think in those ways, and because I see as everybody as family, I would give it to any of my family members, anything they needed or wanted.
That is a great thing to say, and I will take you up on your offer. Because in terms of relationships, whether it is personal, familiar relationship, or at workplaces, there are dynamics of power and
Yeah.
privilege. How do we manage those dynamics of power and privilege?
We all have power and we all have privilege at some, place in our journey. And so noticing when I have power, right? I was just telling somebody where I work, they are willing to give me shoes. If I see a shoe I like, that people will send you these shoes. And no, I will buy the shoes. I get that I could get it for free. But as a person who works for the company, I want to also support the company and support the brilliance of the designers who made the shoe. And so I think we all have those choices. I think the closer we are together and the more power and privilege you have, when you are close to the people without those things, it just makes it harder to ignore it.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we get closer, we all make different decisions. We make hopefully better decisions than we did without that information.
What do you think? Because younger generation which is coming in, they have to navigate the power and privilege dynamics in their, especially in their career and professional environments, and then they sometimes don't get that kind of freedom. How does that play out for younger persons in younger person's life?
If you are a young person and you're not getting what you need from your workplace, I would say a couple things. Number one, have something outside of work because work is not life, it is just work.
Mm-hmm.
And the fear that you have around not making enough money is usually just a fear.
Mm-hmm.
And at some points in my life, I had 3 jobs at the same time. So it wasn't, I had enough money working 3 jobs. So my needs were being met, even though I had to work 3 jobs. I would say the fear that I had, actually, the fear that I had when I met you is what was holding me back the most. The
Mm-hmm.
fear of not accomplishing anything or doing anything great. And I think, especially at that time in my life, I was really worried about it. Like I was really so much so that I was willing to play it really safe. And that would have been my biggest mistake. Corporate America is very political. From a diversity perspective, I usually look at the person with the most power and influence and get close to them first, especially if I think they're going to be a barrier to my work.
Mm-hmm. Oh, so that's an interesting and otherwise advice because people typically stay away from where the barrier will be.
No,
Some people who are overpowered by that fear, what can they do?
I usually ask myself, what do I have to lose? And usually the answer is nothing. Like, what do I have to lose by building a relationship with so and so? Usually the answer is nothing. The fear of losing my job was a real fear when I was younger. And
Mhm.
now I understand like I could do something else.
If you have a high level of degree or education or something which shows your power and privilege, then you are better off. So it's a great advice that all work is honorable as long as it respects you and it values you as a human being.
Mm, yeah.
So when you talk about barriers, a lot of people also talk about microaggressions. What is your take on it, and what is your advice on it?
Whew. So, full disclosure, one of the things I did not miss during COVID were microaggressions. I had a break, like never worrying about what I looked like again for 2 years. It was joy, just pure joy and freedom and freedom. And so the microaggressions are really real. I have a network of people that I kind of parcel those moments out with. To say that they happen, like to name it when they do happen, either with the person or sometimes I need time to process it. Like, did you hear that? Can you believe they just said that? And then to go back to the person lovingly and have a conversation about why that was hurtful. Very few people do I give up on. Very few. I have been like, I don't think that person's going to move, or I'm not the person who's going to move that individual, and like holding it open to the universe that it is possible. It just may not be me.
A lot of people will be turned off by an act of microaggression towards them. How can someone be loving all the time if they are at the receiving end?
Oh yeah, well I would say cry first. Get it out. I would say that. It's painful, right? I mean, I don't expect, especially, marginalized people. I don't expect marginalized people to just take it.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't expect them to ignore it. If you have the time and bandwidth to have it. If you don't, let it go.
Okay.
Take care of yourself and let it go. I know people are tired, yeah, of being the teachers all the time. Also use your allies. It's a great time to use your allies. There are plenty of times I have white allies. I'll say, hey, this person said this. I need you to have a conversation with them.
And fundamentally, human beings are good at heart, but
Yeah.
they don't realize what social conformity has done to them and what they are doing. And they are constantly um, causing pain to other person, which they would not like on themselves also. You said be loving and open, but then you said process it and you don't have to teach all the time. So I want to make it clear that people don't think that Amy said be loving all the time. No, you have to take care of your well-being also. As you have worked in different organizations, 5 or 6, you said you have evolved into a leader, a great leader, which people look at, especially as a diversity leader. What lessons have you learned?
Probably the most important one is time. I remember saying everything I thought right off and like telling people exactly what I was thinking in the moment all the time, and getting coached on like the tone of my words. I took advice from people that I respected around how to deliver a message in a more loving way. But
Mhm.
the biggest part of that is that I was afraid it wouldn't happen. I had to deal with what my fears were. Now I understand that I have more time. So if someone says something, I don't have to address it in the moment. I can wait. I can have a one-on-one conversation with them. It strengthens my relationship with that individual for sure. I didn't publicly embarrass or shame them. They very much appreciate it like all the time. And the uprising of Ferguson made me less afraid that young people wouldn't ask for something different than what currently exists. Now I know young people have seen it and have witnessed, George Floyd's murders be convicted. So they know change is possible, like in a very collective way. And so I'm not afraid that going forward, no one will take the banner and move with it. I now know that people will. And so I'm less afraid. I personally am less afraid and more confident in the future to come.
Personally, I am also in diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging space. And I am fearful that people will react to me and try to get to me. So I hear this a lot from my peers. A practitioner of DEIB lasts 6 months to a year in any workplace doing their job. Have you experienced that?
I usually don't stay long, but that's my personal choice. Like I like going places that have nothing and building them new. So it wouldn't be unusual for me to leave in 3 years. I honestly feel like in diversity work, it has to be more than about like the practitioner. Like there has to be a part of you that has friends outside of work because you might not be liked at work. This is not a job you get for people to like you. Let me say that. So if you're a person who needs to be liked by people, this is probably not the right path. This is because you're the person who's going to change everything. And, that's just part of the role. Sometimes when people come in to change something, people don't like that person or like what they're doing. Maybe over time they do, but initially there's almost always resistance. But being in a space where you're trying to change everything, just know that you're going to run up against some adversity. You should hedge for that. Like, know that's coming and have a plan on how you're going to take care of yourself when it comes.
And it comes from all directions.
Oh,
It's not
yeah.
just
Mm-hmm.
people who are above you or the policies you are trying to transform, but it is people from inner circles, from the same councils or same groups also internally at work. because they have a different idea. You should be an activist in their voice, and how many voices along with your own voice you can represent at that point.
Or they think they can do it better than you. At least once a month, somebody tells me they could do my job. I'm like, I encourage you to do this job. Let me help you prepare for such a moment. Like it's not a job you can't do. It is a job that probably is not what people think on the outside. I would say that. Like it probably looks a lot sexier on the outside than the
Mm-hmm.
actual hard work it is on the inside. I mean, because you don't have to, it's not just being good with people. You have to be smart in scholarship. You have to keep up with
Mm-hmm.
what's going on, you have to temper yourself often. So
Yes, and the expectation is that you will somehow come in as a magician, will use a magic wand and everything will change and everyone will be happy. Change takes a long time. It is a transition and transformation. What do you think leaders from this point onward can do? What would you do in an ideal world?
I would really fund this initiative and movement and prioritize it. And I would bake it into everything that we do. So, one of the things that I noticed is that what was required for people to move from an entry level to a more advanced management level wasn't formal education, whether it was a degree, certificate, but some kind of training. We, the institution, design who's going to be successful and who's not going to be successful. Yes, people have some work to do, and the institution works when people are supported well. So I would say for every senior leader, support the people of color. Like take time to like not just say we're treating them as equitably as we are other people,
Yeah.
but to say what else could we do?
Yeah, equality versus equity. And you
Yeah,
brought up such a good point about institutions actually and corporations can change and impact, have a positive impact, which corporate world does not realize that how much impact they can have. So what are your other major suggestions for the corporate world or the working world, what they can do in terms of impact?
I would definitely say when I say invest, I mean invest in education and learning, facilitated trainers, invest in the education that the whole company needs. And I know that people say, well, diversity training doesn't fix everything. I am convinced that the more people know, the better they respond to new and wonderful ideas around diversity and inclusion. The other part is listen to the young people. Sometimes, somebody will come in right out of school or right out of, high school even and give us a suggestion and we assume that they don't know. I would just say everything great had started with like an artist's imagination. Let's try it. The best failures produce the best results. So I would also say, even if it doesn't work, we probably could learn something from it.
So it is such an important conversation, investing and actually elevating the younger generation, because the younger generation in today's world is very different from the younger generation a generation ago or two generations ago. They have
Mhm.
knowledge at their fingertips and they think very differently. How else can corporations make sure that they are part of the society in which they exist? And a lot of corporations are global, and they probably have their operations kind of fit to the local context. But how
Yeah.
can they ensure that they can have a larger impact in different geographies?
Part of the conversation globally is gender often. And I would say if I could ask major corporations to do something, it would be to listen to the women of color. Often when we say women, we are not talking about women of color. And often women of color aren't in the room. Or even if they're in the room, their voice sometimes is so soft or quiet or ignored that putting them together in a group and like really gleaning insight, I think would make any corporation better than it is right now.
Amy, if you can go back to your younger years, what will you tell yourself?
Wow, if I could go back to my younger years, I wish I would have. I wish I would have taken more international assignments as they came my way. It was the 90s, so it was hard for moms to travel back then. But if I were today, it's a little easier for women to take international assignments. It just gives you a better lens of the whole world instead of just the US context.
Mhm.
And that's life changing. So I would say, and I would travel more, all the things that I wish I would have done earlier in my career. I got later on, but
In closing, I'm going to ask you multiple small snapshots, key
Okay.
lessons of your life,
Jump. Don't be afraid.
message for leaders,
Listen to the women of color.
lesson for individuals, people out in the world,
Don't be afraid to ask for the best life possible.
message for businesses,
Diversify their senior leader staff. And when I say diversify, I mean racially diversify their senior staff. I would also, for companies that have international reach, encourage them to have the USers go outside the US to understand the business more, and not in a takeover kind of way, but just in an understanding. It's something to read and see. It's something actually to be in this space with people that I think you just can't undo. It's like you can't unring that bell. That brings more clarity and more respect.
now your message for the society.
I feel like the universe will provide more for you when you are generous. And so I would say, yeah, it's life is to be given away. I think, one of the best things about being this age is getting to think about what kind of legacy we leave behind. What will they say? And so,
So be generous so that universe is generous to you.
absolutely. And I mean that with like your time, your resources, money, your knowledge, your wisdom, all of those things. Be generous with it. Give it away.
Is there anything else which I have not asked you and you would like to add?
I always have to say my appreciation for you is so grand. I know the people on this call do not understand the difference you made in my life. But I was a very different person before you entered. And I am not just a financially more well-off person than I was when you met me, but I'm a happier person, more happy than I could have ever imagined. So just when you think it doesn't matter, or you don't know the impact you have on somebody's life, I think you are the proof that a person in time can make a difference.
That always chokes me up, Amy. Thank you
Me
for
too.
your kind words. I was there at that moment when it was meant to happen, that we will be there for each other and we will continue to do so. My gratitude for you being in my life and for what you are doing in the world. As you said, we don't realize what impact it makes, the impact you have made in so many people's life, and you will continue to do so. And I think professional and corporate world leaders like you more now than any other time in our history, because other systems are not working for us.
Thanks. It's okay if we get a little weepy. Those are tears of joy.
Yeah,
Yes.
I already had.